I think actually taking the cliche into yourself and applying it to your life and seeing like the truth maybe behind the cliche is harder, or at least it takes more time, right?
Yeah. Or like when that prophecy in Kung Fu Panda said that Tai Lung would escape prison. You remember that?
How to be patient.
Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 40 of How to Be Patient. Preston, how does it feel to be 40 episodes old?
Hey, thanks for having me. When I first went through this middle podcast crisis, I was thinking about a lot of things. Do I buy a new microphone like I did last month? Do I get a new car? Or maybe we could just talk about what Margaret wants to talk about. You know, it's about time we heard a woman's voice on this podcast.
You know what they say about microphones?
Give them to men. Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous occupation these days to be a man with a podcast. Yeah,
but yeah, it is. I mean, listeners, we are filming this on Friday, September 19th. There's so many jokes we could make that we won't make.
Yeah.
If President Trump is listening to our podcast,
we think that Brendan Carr is an upstanding individual and he would never censor anyone.
They love free speech. Today's episode is about acceptance and commitment therapy. And it is the other main type of therapy that I do. It is one that we've gotten questions on the therapy episodes and also in our question box that people would like to know more about different therapy types. And so what better way to spend a Friday night, Preston, than learning about the theory of a therapy?
I'm ready to commit.
I'm ready to both accept you and commit. But first, for our icebreaker today, I sent Preston a quiz that, it's not a quiz. It's like you pick which one you care about more on values, or it's like the values assessment. And I had to do this, actually, the background story is I had to do this in college for this theology class I took. And let's just say that this test was interesting to compare to like my friends and my like boyfriend at the time, because like I feel like my friends who I'm still friends with, we had the exact same values, and other people and I did not. And it was interesting to be like, wait, this is what you value? And like, that was 50 on my values list. To which Preston texted me and said, I don't want to share.
Yeah, I came around. I'm going to share them now.
You're like, I had to lie a little bit.
I'm feeling a little vulnerable here.
So the reason we're starting with the values assessment part of this is Preston does not know this, am going to ask each of us to bring a small, not that personal problem into how we talk about ACT today. And so the first part of it is values, and these values might not apply to the problems we bring up. But so the assessment goes through and gives you your top 5, or you can pay more to learn more about where the other ones fall. But I didn't, and neither did Preston. So in ACT, we use our values to kind of align our action despite the internal emotional states. And so, Preston, what were your values?
Okay, so first I want to say a little bit about this quiz situation. So it wasn't like, here are all these values, and once you rack them and stack them, it would like always compare too. So I felt like it was Tinder, but for like virtues. So it was like swipe left or swipe right on like accountability or pleasure or enthusiasm or discipline. And like some of them, it was like the same, or that's how I felt it. I was like, okay, how do I compare like obedience discipline and accountability? Like those are so intertwined. So I had trouble swiping on these, but this was the product of all of them.
No matches.
My top 5. Yeah, this is who I matched with, and we're going out later this week.
Hey, Jason, can we get a sound effect after his each value?
You know, I was looking at
will you do it Family Feud style where you start with number 5 and go up to 1?
As long as it's not copyright, because we will be like, Jason, can you play the Titanic music? And Jason's like, we cannot afford that license.
He's like, do.
It's not happening, guys. I'm sorry. Which is why I'm learning the harmonica. You know, you gotta make hay. So my top 5
I've never heard someone under 65 say the phrase "make hay." Okay.
Health is my number 1. Mm-hmm. So well-being, fitness, not being sick is what is. I feel like
that's very fair.
Sums it up pretty well. Yeah, I found myself.
Aligned.
So I was always comparing health with other like virtues like pleasure, but I was like, I feel like I can't have as much pleasure if I don't have health. Like I saw health as like a means to achieve all these other different values. Wealth was my next one for actually a similar reason. So like a lot of the things that I want to do or that I wanted to experience that were also on the values list, you like needed wealth to achieve those things. I think I like recoiled a little bit because it said material goods, luxury lifestyle, things that I think I bristle when I think about being associated with them because it makes me seem superficial and materialistic. But at the end of the day, I understand that wealth is money, is power, and it's power to do the things that we want to do. So that's how I rationalized it, at least. Okay,
Yeah.
the next one was accountability. I hear a lot about being responsible and dependable, and actually, I don't like that word. So just being in the military, accountability gets thrown around so much. Like they call it accountability formation when you have to like show up and like do like a head count and they take roll call and everything. So I actually have a pretty negative association every time I saw it. But I was trying to say like, okay, how does this value actually like relate to my life? And the results kind of speak for themselves. Like I do a lot of very disciplined things and I'm constantly need to be responsible and dependable in my job, in my families, for my pets, for my plants. Like
For
of
your
the things that are
podcast.
important to me in my life, this is like a central piece of that, despite how much I
Yeah.
like hate the word. And
I feel like that
then
makes sense, though, that it also bothers you in your, like, military context, but also your life is filled with things about being accountable, so I feel like there's also maybe it's a good value for you and also maybe a value that can kind of overtake all the other values sometimes.
yeah, so sometimes it feels like all my life is just accountability, honestly. Like
Mhm.
you could go to the moon and back just doing online trainings to stay up to date with your various EHRs and
That's true.
military taskers. And all of that's under the umbrella of accountability. Okay. Then challenge. That one was actually pretty easy for me. I
Mm.
think I both liked identifying with it and felt that it was stood its own against some of the other values. So like challenge versus pleasure. I'm like, I've always chosen challenge throughout my life. I don't think there's ever been a time where I like picked like the pleasurable, easy way over like the challenging way. It's just and I did find it like ironic or strange because I do find pleasure in challenge. So then
Mhm.
it also made it hard to differentiate them. And then finally, excitement.
Excitement is number
Mhm.
1, which is interesting related to so pleasure didn't make it on there.
No, it didn't. I guess not. I was thinking it
Huh.
would because I remember I swiped right on pleasure several times,
Mhm.
but just not enough, I guess.
Didn't
So
make
to
it
sum it
didn't
up, I
make it into
had
your life.
health, wealth, accountability, challenge, and excitement. Those are mine.
And how did you feel when you got all 5 of them? Like, does it feel accurate to you?
I think it does. When I knew that wealth was winning for a while was when I texted you like, "Hey, I don't want to
I don't
share
wanna do
this."
this.
I'm like, I don't want people to think I'm a materialistic. Like, there's no way. But then, like, when it was all in context, like health, wealth, accountability, challenge, excitement. I was like, I feel like that's well rounded. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. That's really
Pursuit of
what my
property.
values are. Good old John Locke.
Okay, I was after I did it, I was like, Preston's gonna Preston's gonna be like, "Of fucking course, these are your answers on here."
You're just like,
Um,
it's bad is one virtue, art is another virtue, every day is the other virtue. I'm
daily.
like, how are you even getting these? Like, they're on the
I don't
test.
know, it just told me. My number 5 was actually pleasure, so mine did make it on there because
Mm,
I'm not trying to suffer all of my life, I feel like if you had asked me this, though, like, when I did it 5 years ago, that was not number 5. Or, like, when I did it in college, I guess a
hmm
decade ago, that was not number 5. That would have been like, "What?" It would have been like responsibility, would have been 5. Um, Number 4 is wisdom. I feel like wisdom and curiosity were kind of battling it out on mine, and wisdom won because I
Yeah.
like integration of systems and like theology and poetry with like medicine and science. And I feel like that's kind of wisdom to me. And then 3 was creativity, which goes with the bad art every day, of
hmm
course, and the
Yeah.
podcast
These
and
are all so
psychiatry.
predictable.
tone? What
not
is the tone?
not that you're in like a good way. Like
Okay.
not and not that it like makes you
okay.
mundane, that you're a predictable person, but like these are all egocentric.
That's true. My number 2 is trust. I feel like, I think I've said this on the podcast before, like in friendship and dating and even with my family, like I feel like the negative part of this is probably I'm someone that holds a grudge, but like if I'm like with someone until the day we die, like I've been a bridesmaid like so many times,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I the shadow side of this is I can't really see negative about people until it's too late and so many things have built up that I'm like, oopsies, haha.
Wasn't loyalty one of them?
Yeah.
So
But I feel
trust
like
made it,
for
but
some
loyalty
reason the
didn't.
word trust resonated with me more because I feel like loyalty can be like loyalty despite like nonsensical loyalty, whereas trust
Mhm.
to me is like I will turn it off eventually.
Loyalty can be blind obedience,
Yeah.
and loyalty can be influenced by trust, but not always.
I think also filling these out that some of it is there are values and they're aspirational. So I think I also try to be more trusting despite my sometimes cynical
Mhm.
underside.
I see.
My last one was love. I'm sorry. I don't know what.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Well, like I don't know, like I feel like that. I
Mhm.
feel like I love a lot of people and things and places and memories,
Mhm.
and so it is. I don't know.
And love is pleasure. So pleasure, wisdom, creativity, trust, and love. Those are your
Mhm.
5.
No
Huh.
responsibility in sight.
Yeah, not a
No
single
challenge.
overlap between us. It's interesting.
Mm-mm.
And yet,
We're
we're both,
foils.
look at us both here on a podcast.
And here we are. Well, when you asked me this, you did say we'll be good like opposites of each other. So
Yes, this was intentional chat.
it was.
So if you're listening this morning and you're kind of curious about your own personal values, the website we used was personal, valu.es. So if you just type that into your search bar,
Not
it should bring you
sponsored.
to the same values assessment we took, and you can take the free thing and find out your top 5.
So we are going to take a very quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about why we talked about values, because values are kind of one of the core principles within acceptance and commitment therapy, which from here on out, I will be referring to as ACT, which is how people in the field say it. It is not ACT, which I did call it ACT for the first 6 months of my training.
Okay, ACT.
And we'll be back. Okay, so Preston, what
Yes.
do you know about ACT?
I know that acceptance and commitment therapy it's on the branch of like cognitive behavioral therapies. And it's kind of like, all I've really heard about it is that it's a way to kind of change CBT and apply it to people that can't necessarily alter their situation. So a lot of CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy is acknowledging that you have some of these like maladaptive thought patterns and then kind of untwisting them, but also changing the way you behave that puts you into those maladaptive thought patterns. But sometimes you can't change your environment at all. Like one example could be like my mom. She's in a wheelchair. So if a lot of her cognitive distortions come from her like inability to do things because she's paralyzed, well, it doesn't help to say like, have you tried not being paralyzed?
What
And
if
then
you
we're
really
like,
thought about it?
yeah. Like, oh man, the CBT stuff is not working as well as I thought.
Like,
I'm kidding.
I don't
Obviously,
know how to
CBT is a
restructure.
lot more thorough than that. But a lot of it, the conversation shifts to, okay, how do we accept the primary stressor that is unchangeable, but still find ways to function, live our life the way we want to? That's all I like. So I know like philosophically, like kind of what it accomplishes. I know
Mhm.
nothing else about it or like
About the
how you
like
operate
how,
in
what,
it.
why, who, when parts.
Exactly.
Where. Yeah. So, okay. So, my background with ACT is so I've been training in it for 2 years and had a supervisor at my residency and did half day of ACT clinic for the last 2 years. So, had like 2 or 3 ACT patients once weekly. So, ACT is, you were right on this, that it is sort of a branch of CBT. It's technically third wave, like behavior therapy, first, and like is a descendant of Skinner, but is also developed from the fact that CBT in the like 70s, 80s, 90s was the thing that was being the most researched post DSM-3 in terms of how we think about categorizing mental illness and then trying to develop therapies and medications, but for this episode, therapies that can systematically address it and be studied via like randomized control trials. And CBT was the best one at being able to manualize itself. Psychoanalysis, though I love her, did not do as well with that, and also a little bit didn't believe in it for a while. They're like, how do you measure what we do? Which is kind of valid. But one of the problems, as you were saying, though, with CBT, or at least CBT when it was practiced, 70s, 80s, 90s, was this kind of focus in the model of cognitions or thoughts, behaviors, and then emotions, right? That is the CBT triangle. But kind of confronting thoughts, doing thought logs where you kind of argue against yourself and use the Socratic method to kind of pull at the thought and see if it's really true or see if it's a logical fallacy or, any number of things that you're overvaluing it or catastrophizing it. And ACT somewhat puts that cognitions part out of the way in terms of what we're actually doing in sessions. And like you said, it is very helpful for cases where you can't reappraise the kind of painful stimuli, or you can't make the pain go away, or maybe you've tried. Often people will try the kind of CBT way of things, and they're still left with either overwhelming pain and chronic pain disorders, overwhelming anxiety or rumination and OCD, things like that. And so ACT as it is now tends to not focus on finding out or duking it out with the truthfulness of your thoughts.
Yeah, and a lot of them are like already true, and there's no point in debating that.
The other part of this, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the kind of like theory and philosophy behind ACT. So the philosophy behind it is, a quote unquote pragmatic philosophy, which is functional contextualism, which is basically just like there's not just like one stimuli and then one response. There's everything that goes into a single person's emotional state and behaviors is very dependent on when, why, who, what, all these things that happened and shape it.
Functional contextualism. Functional contextualism. So in the context of my life or given everything that's in my circumstances, how do I function?
Yeah. And I think also like with that, from that philosophy comes the idea, and this is true for other behavioral therapies as well, that it's not so much trying to figure out like what is the core truth or the real story underneath this. It is this working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Which you can see how that ties very directly to this idea of not spending as much time trying to restructure thoughts or reframe.
Mm-hmm.
It's more kind of like the thoughts don't actually decide what reality is in a way that matters pragmatically for your kind of behaviors.
Yeah. So CBT is more of the who, why, and this is more of the what, how.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, and they do overlap, right? And there are some branches of CBT that have kind of worded things similarly. There's a paper I'll cite in the show notes that Stephen Hayes wrote that talks kind of about what ACT is and where it can overlap. Actually, that's Stephen Hayes didn't write it. It's an article in a book that's called The Encyclopedia of CBT, and there's a chapter on ACT that compares them. But yeah, basically, that is the first part of it. And then the theory within it is something that we're not going to go into because we could probably spend a whole episode on this. And I don't think people want that. And I don't think that I could spend a whole episode accurately describing the theory, but it is relational frame theory. And basically, this is the idea that language in ACT, the idea applying this is kind of language is part of how we shape and relate to stimuli. So it's not just, if we go all the way back, it's not just like for humans, it isn't as simple as like bell means food. So you start salivating when you hear a bell. It's like our thoughts and understanding of a narrative also are part of how we understand.
You said that's relationship frame theory?
Relational frame theory.
Okay,
yeah.
So how I frame my relationship with my objects and experiences.
Yeah, or that the framing matters and impacts how you are feeling, behaving, suffering, or having mental illness.
As in, like, if I anticipate that it's going to be painful, it's going to be more painful versus if I anticipate that it's serving some other thing.
I think yes. In that anticipating is like something your mind is creating. It's that like our thoughts and words and internal feelings and imaginings impact the way that we respond to the stimuli. It's not just things outside of us.
Yeah. I'm picturing like hot wax being an example of
Say
that.
more.
Like I feel like
Why?
if I pick up a candle, I'm like tilting it or something as I'm walking with this hot wax drips on my hand, I'll be like, ow, like I'll be surprised, I'll get hurt, I'm not expecting any of it. But like, I don't know, maybe you got some hot wax dripped on your back in like a BDSM scenario. You're like, well, this doesn't hurt as bad as I thought. Maybe it actually would give you pleasure. And that's one of your core values.
Can you not be a freak for one episode? Can you not sexualize something for one episode?
Well, it makes it stick. Like I always had to use like those like sexual acronyms in med school to memorize things. So I'm like, okay, relational frame theory. I'm just going straight to hot wax now. The narrative we have around candles.
So, but I just want to say it is different than like the CBT necessarily reframe. Like this theory is mainly just that like there is a relationship between our thinking and putting words and language to something and how we actually experience it.
Yeah.
So before you go back into your cave of candle wax and stuff.
Recedes into the dark.
One of the ways they say it in this chapter from CBT is that ACT is an intervention approach designed to bring language to heal, as in to a heal, like a dog, not heal as in to heal and make better, so that it can become a tool to be used when it is useful rather than an unseen process that consumes the humans that host it.
That makes sense.
Which will make more sense as we talk about some of the processes, I think. One of the other ways they said in this book chapter was that ACT cares more about context over content compared to regular CBT. So again, less about like moving the kind of details and syntax and words in sentences around, more about like, well, what are you doing when you leave therapy? Like, it's great if we like rearrange these thoughts and make you think better, but does it actually make your life better? Okay. Does all of that make sense? There's one other thing, I guess, with this I want to say, which is that Stephen Hayes, who is like credited as the main creator of content creator, scientist and creator of ACT.
I mean, it is, if you think about it, it is content.
It is content, just because it's PubMed as your platform.
It's like, yeah, I post a lot on PubMed.
Yeah, I'm a PubMed influencer, not a big deal. I just want to say the other thing is that for the last 7-8 years, he has been moving more towards this idea of process-based therapy. So he still is very pro-ACT, but it has made him want to now
proactive.
Wonder. No, so process-based therapy.
I know you said he was like pro-ACT. I was making a pun.
That one didn't hit quite.
Okay,
the same.
Gotcha. Just forget I said anything. I'm going to go jump off.
Jason, cut that out. Yeah. He won't now because I said that. Process-based therapy is more of this idea of taking a step back and actually asking, like, what are the factors in different therapies that are therapeutic? Like, what is actually impacting people so that we don't keep ending up with more of this alphabet soup of different therapies, but can say, are there consistent things in good psychodynamic therapy and good DBT and good ACT and da-da-da-da-da. And if you're a real nerd about this, you can also hear there's a panel that he and like Marsha Lenehan were on at one point that he talks about that they were both like, yeah, I call it this in DBT and he calls it this in ACT. And maybe they call it this in CBT, but is this the same thing and we're just describing it differently? So
yeah, I can really feel the pragmatics coming through in their kind of priority system. Like, how are we making anyone better? What are you doing after you leave? How do we use words to like improve your life? Like, let's not get caught in this like tide pool of other kind of BS because it's basically saying you don't have the luxury to sit around and scratch your chin and think all day about where does this come from. You need to get better.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so that being said, let's talk a little bit about how ACT. So ACT is transdiagnostic. So it's meant to be used across different diagnoses and can be helpful for a lot of different diagnoses, whether it's an addiction or chronic pain, depression, anxiety, OCD. There have been eating disorders even, there are emerging studies there. And it's partially probably because in ACT, they the main goal they have is increasing psychological flexibility to be able to have a life and actions that make that life that are more in line with your values.
And you have to start with your values to make things more in line with them.
We usually, yes. Yeah. In general, that's the goal. Sorry, you are right. My ACT supervisor just popped into my mind of being like, you don't actually do values until you're like a number of sessions in and you actually know the person. But yes, yeah. Ideally, that's the end goal. So how would you think about it? Like when you have someone in your clinic, either for CBT or psychodynamic, you can do either for this exercise. What would you say is the hypothesis of a CBT therapist or a psychodynamic therapist when it comes to what the therapy will fix, aka what's broken? Like what are the problems that CBT is trying to fix?
It's often trying to fix a self-concept, ultimately. Like there's somewhere deep down, there's this maladaptive core belief, a label you've put on yourself, like I am unlovable or I'm worthless. And you try to disentangle that while also working to change how you react to a lot of the kind of downstream effects of this self-concept you have. So ultimately, like the whole therapy can kind of live and die in just talking about how you feel about yourself.
And I will say probably some of the CBT folks would raise a hand at that and say, we do exposures and we do behavioral things. But yeah, I think you're right that there's a pushing back and forth on this like conception of self and at the very least kind of fixed cognitions around how the world is and how that will impact you.
Yeah. And then I think psychodynamic is similar
Really
in that regard. I think psychodynamic addresses like how you became who you are. Like almost like it's the story of how my 5 values came to be.
I think that's right. Yeah. And how you force those values onto everything in the room now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's psychodynamic. Yes, we are oversimplifying to the stalwarts of the other camps who are listening to this podcast. But
we're trying, guys. Okay,
maybe you should have an ACT mindset and just accept that we're going to be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to be pragmatic about this.
How you want
for the
we're going to
purpose
be
of the
giggling
podcast,
and we're going to be wrong. That's the podcast T-shirt. I'm just a baby, except for I'm not. I'm now a toddler and you're a baby still for training wise. But problems. Okay, so the problems in an ACT view is kind of threefold. So we're wanting to increase psychological flexibility to be able to live more of a life that based on your values. But I'll say 3 things. One is you can't be like the person that is coming for ACT therapy. We would hypothesize you can't be present to the here and now. Like you can't notice what's happening around you, in you, outside of you in a way that you can like select and direct your attention. Secondly, you are stuck, ruled by, or fused to a certain emotion, thoughts, or sensation, whether that be infused to it as in ruminating, stuck on it, can't move beyond it, or fused to it as you're so avoidant of that it becomes the main driver of your life by driving you away from anything mildly related to it. And thirdly, you're not living, your actions are not matching your values and what would be a meaningful life for you as you see it now. So those are the 3 problems.
So you can't be present. There's a dissonance between how you're living and how you want to live. And I'm kind of blanking on what the middle one was.
You are like fused or avoiding heavily a certain emotion, thought, internal experience, or sensation.
Okay.
So those are the kind of an overview of the problems. And what we talk about in ACT is being process-based and that there are 6 core processes that we're working on any given time. And before we talk about that, I am going to give us something to think about on the break, and you too, listeners. And when we come back, we're going to talk about those processes, and Preston and I will share a small, not that personal, not that vulnerable life problem that we each have and see if we can apply each concept to how we might help ourselves or a patient with it. And you can think along with us. So we will be right back. Welcome back, guys. We are still talking about ACT. And we are going to talk about the 6 core processes that an ACT therapist will like teach to you and then you will come back to iteratively as you try to work on different aspects. So Preston and I have both thought about problems that we are actually experiencing in our lives that are small and not that vulnerable for us to talk about. My problem is that I feel like I never get to bed on time, and it's like I come home from work and I'm really tired, and I just want to scroll and turn my brain off, and then I need to do my dishes and laundry and other stuff, and I just don't, and then I go to bed and everything's still kind of messy. But then I wake up the next day and it's things are messy and it pisses me off and I'm kind of tired. And I avoided going to bed on time to whatever. So that's my problem that I would like to think about through the lens of these 6 processes of what I'm doing, coming up against, or avoiding. Preston.
I would say my problem is my screen time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I've made this my New Year's resolution in the past, where I want to be more present, and not necessarily present for other people, but just experience the world around me in a way that feels active and lucid. Because there were times where at the peak of me posting and making a ton of content, where I was always refreshing and checking comments or making new content or editing, where it would feel almost like I lived in my phone and I would check the real world, and I hated that.
Mm-hmm.
And now, even if something isn't being witnessed by an audience, I still want to feel present in the room and be oh, I just did this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been hard for me, and I've been trying to cut my screen time down. I think it used to be around 6 or 7 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think its worst was 8 or 9 hours a day. And I was dang, I was awake for 15 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So most majority of my time today was on my phone. I hated that. So I guess it's both not failing to be present with my environment or being able to pay attention to things around me, and also incongruent with how I want to live my life.
Mm-hmm. So with our values, you're already connecting them. Okay. So one of the things before we say any of the processes, I'll say that every modality of therapy has kind of an archetype or stereotype, I guess, orientation of the type of therapist that does it. And so the classic one, right, is an analyst. A classical analyst is very much a blank slate, isn't super responsive to the way, and up to and including the way they set up the room, right? There's a way an analyst interacts. There's CBT, people associate with having exposures for homework, having to do thought logs, having a kind of Socratic leaning, with patients. And for ACT, what you'll notice with people who do ACT, and this is encouraged within the method, is that they tend to use a lot of metaphors. There tend to be experiential exercises, so not just exposure, but when talking about a concept, they'll often use metaphors, or one of the common ones we'll do is talking about diffusion from a thought. And the exercise will be okay, I want you to hold your hand. Let's say your hand is your thought that you're worrying about. Put it here. What can you see? Put it out here. What can you see? Oh, you can still see most things, but your arm hurts. What if you just rested your hand in your lap? And it's it's still there. It's there, but it's not taking over things. So that is both a metaphor and kind of something that can help make, I think, some of these concepts a little stickier.
Live action metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. So they tend to do that a lot. And then they tend to, and this is where I think there can be similarities with DBT or dialectical behavioral therapy, they talk about logical paradoxes. So kind of two things being true, and things as they are in the world, which is when we try to only feel happiness, we often feel less happiness. When we try to get rid of our anxiety, we paradoxically increase our anxiety, things like that. And then lastly, they do values assessments, and they constantly are kind of bringing you back to that and asking how this applies in that pragmatic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. That the pursuit of something often leads to the loss of it, the detriment of it. People that hope to live with no regrets end up paralyzed, not making decisions, and regretting more things.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples like that that we've all heard as cliches, but I think actually taking the cliche into yourself and applying it to your life and seeing the truth maybe behind the cliche is harder, or at least it takes more time, right?
Yeah. Or like when that prophecy in Kung Fu Panda said that Tai Long would escape prison. You remember that? So
Not seen that
they
movie.
sent the duck to go tell them to double all
Not
the
seen that
guards.
movie.
What? You haven't
Not
seen
seen
Kung
that
Fu
movie.
Panda? Oh my
Still
gosh.
haven't seen that movie.
Well, anyways, the duck shows up and his feather
Spoilers.
falls down. Yeah. Guys, if you haven't spoiled Kung Fu
If
Panda
you
for
haven't
you.
seen Kung Fu Panda yet.
So they were trying to make things more secure by having this duck go tell them to secure the palace, but then his feather slips out and it falls over by the prisoner, and he uses that feather to pick the lock to his own handcuffs and escapes because of it.
Oh.
So actually, Kung Fu Panda is act pilled.
Act.
Yeah. And they know about these logical paradoxes.
Honestly, though, ACT, similar to DBT, has some relationship with kind of like Zen, Buddhism, things like that, like philosophy that is not very Western. So there is something in a lot of martial arts that I feel like includes paradox of like gentleness is strength. And I don't know anything about Kung Fu or Kung Fu Panda, so that's where I'll stop. But like that the use of like strength for its own self is weakness and all these
Yeah,
things.
you have to eliminate desire
No.
to eliminate pain or pleasure.
Yeah, and I don't go that far as an ACT therapist, as you can see by my values list.
Well, so that's just you're not the
Pleasure
dragon warrior.
Okay, well, you're not either.
I'm not either. That's okay.
Okay, so with those things in mind, the first one that I often start with people is the idea of diffusion, which is process 1. Diffusion, we know what it means literally. It's also technically called cognitive diffusion, but it's the idea of distancing yourself from kind of internal sensations, thoughts, things like that. And so it's not the idea of like, let me distance myself and not feel sadness when I feel sad, or let me try to like push this away and pretend it's not there. And that's where we get into this metaphor of like, okay, how much does this get in your way if this is the thought and it's right here? Okay, a lot gets in your way. What if you like hold it all the way out here? Well, then my arm starts to hurt after 2 minutes. Like, so it's not to obliterate it and try to never feel anxiety. It's also not to hyperfixate on it, but to hold it in this distance. That is the idea of cognitive diffusion. So having space from your automatic thoughts or feelings or prior kind of schema.
Okay, I can do that. I'm staring at my phone right now. I'm just going to distance myself from it. I'm going to put it over here.
So like one thing I'll often ask people is kind of like when they bring something into therapy they want to work on. So Preston, you want to work on using your phone less.
Mm-hmm.
What are the internal things that happen that make you, when you've tried in the past to use it less and it's not worked out as well? What are the kind of internal feelings, thoughts, stories, automatic things that come up that you feel like have gotten in your way or made you start using it again?
So, it's a couple. One will be like boredom. So boredom exists in like my world. Like I don't let myself be bored. So I don't like the feeling of boredom. So I try to do something to eliminate boredom. A very easy thing to do, most mindless thing to do is to pull my phone out and check it. So that's one. Another one will be like seeking pleasure or seeking an emotion. Like I know if I scroll for a little bit, like maybe I'll find something that makes me laugh or makes me think about something or that I enjoy, at least catches my attention. So there's somewhat of a reward path there. You're both like, you relieve the punishment of boredom, then you're rewarded by opening up your phone. The other thing that's been tough for me actually is like, I can see those and I can say like, oh, that's not right. Like you should deal with the boredom, Preston. Like I can recognize that. But then I have these fears like that I'm going to get canceled or something. Like I don't think I'm doing anything to get canceled. Clarify.
So now you have me in your life and you text me.
Yeah, but like I'll post a video, and I'll gain some traction, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. The video's going well, and I've like woken up and had videos get like 1 million views overnight, which is exciting, but it can also be scary because you don't want like it to have gotten 1 million views because it's now on like the cover of like NBC, and they're like, look at this terrible person who has this awful opinion, and we should all shame him, So I'm like that could happen. So I feel like compelled to check because of that. But then the problem is once I check and discover that I'm not canceled in 0.2 seconds, then now I'm in my phone and
Yeah,
sucked
you're
in
your
and
phone.
doing other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the anxiety and uncertainty about something that hasn't necessarily happened to you before, but that you have had, as we talked about on the podcast before, like consequences for different people, like in med school, not liking your videos. So I also think it's
Mm-hmm.
informed by the past experience of having had negative things happen if a video was seen widely or seen by someone who was like, cancel him.
Yeah, exactly. Like a successful video is both like pride inducing and fear inducing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so diffusion from that, or being able to take distance, let's say from, I think that last one is kind of the most potent. I mean, I think the others are common, but you have insight into them. What diffusing, what would it look like when that thought comes up that you're like, I have to check this to make sure I'm not getting canceled, even though I know if we were doing CBT, we might challenge it by being like, it's illogical, it's happened this time. And if it does happen, we're checking it all the time, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. That would be the CBT approach. ACT, though, my patients are sick of me saying is, we're going to drop the rope being the tug of war with examining the thought and ruminating on it. And also would be like not checking your phone. And so this is where there's also the overlap with like exposure and response prevention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might be diffusing, might be in that moment when the urge comes to notice that it's there, to name it what it is, and then to give yourself something that is 3 to 10% more challenging than giving into it right away.
Hmm. Well, I could acknowledge that I'm worried that my post is a little bit controversial and that's why I want to check, but this is mostly like anxiety driven hypotheticals and I don't have evidence that it is doing poorly right now. Poorly in the sense of like it's gaining negative traction. And I guess I could always check on my computer
Mhm.
or my laptop instead. And those platforms are much less likely to kind of just like suck me in
Yeah. Yeah. So
thoughtlessly.
I think that second part is kind of diffusion. In the internal, before you do anything else though, it's not noticing like why it might be wrong as much as it is like noticing, and this is related. So the second part of the second process that is very related to diffusion is self as context. So in this example, it's noticing that that thought is occurring and it's occurring along the backdrop, or it's a leaf in the river of self that you are, which sounds very
Mm-hmm.
highfalutin, but is basically just the orientation and ACT as a therapist and a patient is like recognizing that this does not necessarily, this is something that thoughts are something that happen in me, and my brain is good at creating thoughts, but not necessarily like accurate thoughts. And so I can
Mm-hmm.
ignore them,
Mm-hmm.
or that's an option. I can step back and not say this thought and emotion dyad I'm feeling is automatically correct in who I am and
Yeah.
requires this behavior.
Not every thought my brain constructs is an exact reflection of me and my values.
Right. And the way we often will do this for the like metaphor experiential thing is like have someone do the Stroop like word color test and be like, all right, tell me what like we're gonna do this really fast. Tell me like what each word says, and they'll say the color on accident, and they'll be like, okay. So your brain was like is good at coming up with something,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily the something that is the correct or like intended task that you send to it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we'll do is like hold up like a piece of paper that's like red on the front and green on the back, and then be like, so what color is this? And they'll be like red, and then you flip it around, and you're like, so you're wrong. Your brain doesn't know everything. So you're wrong. Okay, you don't say it like that. If my ACT supervisor ever hears this, that's not what I would say.
You know, that reminds me of is like that. If you should include this, that Charlie Kirk video where he's like, he shows him the photo and he's like, so you know, beyond a shadow of doubt that this is a human, and he's like, yes, and he's like, this is a dolphin fetus.
I've seen that. I have seen that. So yeah, so that's one of the core things. And if we go up to that definition, but it's the idea that our brains are made to come up with solutions quickly and to survive. And that is great in a lot of ways, but not necessarily great in being like, all of these are automatically correct, which again is kind of a cliche, but to actually live as if your brain is kind of like AI, where it's like, this might be right and it could be a good start, but it may be hallucinating or just like confabulating things together.
Yeah,
If
and
we
your brain literally does hallucinate.
It does. And so recognizing that, and then so the self is context part of that. That is where we will do the meditation. That's like, no, put your thought on a leaf and let it go on the stream, and sit by the stream and put your feet in the stream and watch the leaf float away, and know the leaf will float back if you need it, but it's a leaf and it's not you. And there's many leaves in the stream right now, and you're laughing and you couldn't do mindfulness, and that's why I suggest that maybe you need it.
Yeah, it's funny. No, I was actually thinking about how like all of your metaphors have to do with like summer camp. You're playing tug of
They
war,
do.
you're going down to the stream, you're watching leaves. And I was thinking like, how would I make these metaphors work for like a finance bro?
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
so bro, like what's the return on investment for this thought that you have right now?
They've
Let's run the
been
numbers.
on the earth. Finance bros. Okay, rights for finance bros. They've been on the earth before. Famously, I advocate for rights for finance bros. That brings us to present moment, which is mindfulness, basically, right? So the ability to direct your attention, which I think is related to yours. And I'm also focusing on your problem because otherwise the episode's going to be super long. And I think mine has to do with my screen use too. So I'm just doubling down and making this for both of us.
It's two people, the same problem, really.
Two people, same problem, different values. So present moment awareness is all the many different ways. And we've done the mindfulness episode, so I will not belabor this right now, but that you can direct your attention to different stimuli other than just what your thought hallucinating machine is helpfully or not helpfully coming up with. So the ability to notice that you are stuck in rumination around a topic you always worry about, the ability to notice that, oh, here's this sensation again of wanting to check my phone because I'm kind of unsettled by the idea that I don't have certainty around if a video isn't going to be canceled. That is in mine I think for my like going to bed on time related to phone stuff is kind of like, well, I don't want to go wash my dishes that are kind of gross, and like maybe I'll just find another good thing on the phone, and then the feeling of motivation will come. That is my like where I get stuck is like I wait for the feeling to change, but do nothing to change the feeling. And so the mindfulness is the ability to move the attention. So there's one thing of noticing, but if we just had diffusion and it was like, okay, I know I'm not that thought, and then we didn't include anything else, then you're kind of just like, okay, like
what am I then? If not my thoughts, what am I?
And then I'm in this like the abyss that Squidward's in, that one, the nothing abyss. And so the way that this pairs together is I'm noticing this anxiety. I checked this an hour ago. I don't need to check it again. That's not in line with how I want to live my life. And I'm okay with this level of risk I'm taking by posting a video. So can I move my attention 50% to the paint by numbers I'm trying to do instead? Or the cat sitting on my lap?
So for finance pros listening, that'll be your risk tolerance. You know, we'll move
Preston's opening a prestige
risk,
private practice for finance
platform. It's like my Preston's boutique therapy where I just only work with Goldman Sachs. I think those people exist.
They do. They're like business coaches. I feel like they're like people who did train as therapists. They're like executive therapy coaches. So we have diffusion and self as context, which are related. And then we have the present moment awareness. And then the last one is where we get the name, which is acceptance. And I prefer using the word willingness. Why are you squeezing your hand like that?
I'm accepting. I'm like hyper accepting.
You look constipated. You're like, I am working on a bowel movement. I'm bearing down right now. I'm working my pelvic floor.
I'm bearing down on
I'm accepting I have a pelvic floor. That's for our listeners who've heard every episode so far. So acceptance, but a lot of people now use the word willingness because acceptance can have the connotation of like, just accept that the world is bad, or just like accept this injustice. And obviously that is kind of fucked up.
Yeah, I think acceptance underscores or like implies a level of agreement.
Yes.
Whereas willingness, you can be willing to do something that you don't agree with.
Right. Like I'm willing for you to weirdly talk about your hot wax addiction, but I don't agree.
But you don't openly accept it.
I don't accept it. And so, yes, exactly. Willingness.
And I think if you talk about acceptance, you can get that tug of war about whether or not it's fair.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it doesn't matter that it's not fair. It just matters what you're willing to do.
And I think willingness is also good because I often will say, this is ACT, the type of therapy we're doing. The A comes for acceptance, but I like using the word willingness because acceptance does, like we're
And
saying, mean all these things.
just doesn't sound as good. Willingness and commitment therapy.
And then say we will, like the acceptance does not mean saying if someone's in a horrible relationship or in a job that is like they're getting yelled at every day. That is not what we are accepting when there's any chance we can change something. But the willingness part comes in to things like you mentioned, like being in a wheelchair, or I think a lot about my patients with chronic pain or my patients who have eating disorders who are going through recovery and have a lot of like abdominal pain and recurrent negative thought, like body thoughts and urges, that those will get better over time, but they will not go away, at least in the foreseeable coming months. And so there has to be a level of willingness, or allowing is also another word I'll use, so that we can apply our skills and make the best of what we kind of have right now. But I do think that this is one of them that I don't necessarily start with as much as you get your way there in the therapy, because it can be super invalidating if you kind of come at it early or you miss the validating and compassion and rapport building parts of the therapy and are like, you need to be willing to.
Yeah. It's almost like, who are you to tell me that I need to be willing to do anything? That's actually probably, and this is true for a lot of different therapies, I think, probably the biggest thing I've learned in now, I guess, a year and a half of doing therapy is to not skip the validation and like supportive psychotherapy phase. Like I'm truly understanding why it's like a tree that starts with supportive psychotherapy and then moves into other things. So I think before I'm like, cool, you got thoughts, let's challenge them, back and forth.
You do love a challenge.
And now I'm like,
excitement.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this will be challenging and exciting, and I'm holding you accountable. Like I'm knocking off my list without yours.
Wait,
ready to rock and roll?
What were the other two values?
Oh, health and wealth.
You're like, you're not getting paid very well for that.
Yeah. So now I'm like, first 3 sessions, like, just tell me about yourself.
You're
like, let's like get to know each other a little bit first.
I'm afraid to tell you, you're not beating the man discovers empathy allegation with this one.
Dude.
You're not.
You think this is bad?
Imagine
me saying this out loud in supervision, and every other co-resident in my supervision is a female. And they're just like, okay.
Well, maybe
I was like, guys, you don't jump in to the maladaptive core belief like 30 minutes in. You realizing that? And they're like, yes, Preston.
Are you clocking this? Are you clocking? Did you guys know about this? You're like, I just did some mushrooms last weekend, and I bet other people have feelings.
Turns out you should validate someone before you like try to tell them how to change their life.
Isn't that crazy? It's so crazy. Even though you know better than them on how to run their life.
Yeah. I had a
sarcastically.
supervisor tell me that all therapy is convincing someone that what you think is wrong with them is wrong with them.
That's like a very evil view of therapy.
I know, it is evil.
That's like not what I would describe therapy as. That's not. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's the shadow I can't recognize. But yeah. Okay, so the other two. So those 4 I thought of as like the mindfulness kind of diffusion, whatever parts. And then the other core part are values. So finding what is meaningful, as well as assisting people with discernment, that like there are many people who will, if you ask them off the cuff, like, what do you value? Will say one thing, but it's really something that they sort of value, or that they think they should value, or they have the reaction like you did to taking the test as like, oh, I shouldn't value this one thing I put, so I'll put something else. So that is part of the values work, is getting to know someone in this relationship and hearing some of their like history and stories, right? And getting a little bit more existential by tapping into what has depth for them. Especially because a lot of people that you treat with ACT have anxiety or OCD, so they can have a lot of shame and kind of morality hangups around what they should value.
And
then
I think a lot of people pre-filter what they say that they value. Yeah. And I felt myself even doing that when I was taking the test. I was like, what do I want to value? And then I had to like really rewind to be like, okay, my actions and my decisions show what I value. So I tried to go off of, rather than what I thought about it, with like, what is my life show that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think part of me wishes I valued responsibility more. Like, I don't know. Like, I think it's interesting because I think mine is reflective of me, but it's interesting the ones when you like look through it and you're like, I kind of wish I was someone who was super motivated by this, that, or the third thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm kind of mad that I didn't have like creativity or wisdom on there. I was like, yeah, like I'm surprised I didn't value them higher. But I think I want to value them. Like I want to do creative things, but then I end up just going on another run.
Well, you can see though how people like do something like the values thing, and like people always say like relationships are they're less about like direct compatibility in terms of like interests and like likes and dislikes and more about like priorities and values. And you can see how I feel like I knew someone who had to take this test before they like when they were doing pre-Cana in the Catholic Church marriage counseling before marriages, called pre-Cana, and they had to do this. And I think them and their partner had the like exact same ones except for one, and they were like, "We're knocking it out of the park. We're we're crushing it." They're like, "It's gonna suck when it's like trash day though, because neither of us
Yeah, because
neither of us
the
values this."
accountability one, yeah.
Yeah. The last one is committed action of these processes. So this is where all of your other skills, behavioral activation, other things can kind of be slotted into these processes from other therapies if it applies. But committed action is helping people and patients. Like I find this is where like kind of acting together as two frontal lobes in the room to get creative and figure out how do we apply these values despite these kind of hangups and obstacles that you're getting stuck
Mm-hmm.
on. And also, where is the rigidity and not being psychologically flexible making you try to change this in such a like rapid way that you end up in this cycle of failure?
Interesting. It's intriguing to me how the first like majority of these steps are really like establishing a base of mindfulness, and then it very quickly just goes into okay, now what are your values and how do we commit to action?
Yeah. But they're not but it's I guess it's not quick. Like I'm giving you the processes, but ACT is not a
Mm-hmm.
linear therapy. So like
Yeah.
you could see how you could spend a year just working on willingness and talking about like all the stories that come up around why they shouldn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
willing to accept this, or why all the ways that like using their brain prior has protected them to like keep them safe, and that willingness can't be true, or trying to like let this thing be makes them feel like they're going to have a panic attack. And
Mm-hmm.
then how do we work on diffusion there as well as like present moment awareness? So there's a lot of stories that come up in those first four, and the values and committed action. And I think one of the things that I really like in ACT is that from a structural standpoint, I think it kind of toes the line between psychodynamic or insight therapy and like CBT or DBT, where there
Mm-hmm.
is a process that you exist within. There is this container, but instead of being like a running track that is a circle with like lines and this is where you must run, it's like a field enclosed with a fence. But psychodynamic is just like the
And there's
entire world.
daisies and there's a stream
Yeah,
and you run
there's
over to the
leaves in
tug
the
of war
stream.
section. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what is the
Okay,
finance version of this?
ACT camp. Yeah, I like it.
Camp. Yeah, I would like there's a place I worked at called the OCD Institute at McLean Hospital, and it is kind of like ACT camp. like there's memes on the wall about like not falling for your compulsions, and like all they do is like ACT, exposure and response, and like compassion based mindfulness, and it's just like we're doing this. We're doing a session, a group therapy where all of us imagine something we're the most afraid of. That's like the thing in Harry Potter when they like have to see a
Mm-hmm.
Bogart and it transforms and then they learn to do the ridiculous spell. It is like literally like that. It was very effective.
Yeah, I had an attending one time who she would apply some ACT type, I guess, philosophies to her treatment of patients. She worked with eating disorders, and so
Dang
she
it.
would have us eat a cockroach, not cockroach, a grasshopper. Like how they like sell those at like some of the like international
Oh yeah.
supermarkets and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. Yeah, so the purpose of it was to like expose yourself to an unpleasant experience while having like mindfulness through it.
Mhm.
The purpose that she did with us as trainees was to like have empathy for patients who feel this way about eating almost every food.
Like our food,
That-
yeah.
Yeah. So like this might be a strawberry to your patients, but like to you, it's like a grasshopper that's repulsive to
Yeah.
you.
Oh,
So
I love that.
yeah. So I thought it was a fun exercise.
This is also why I think one of the psychological components, and I don't just think this, there are papers on this, like talking about it, but like why exercise can be a really great thing for people. And it's a skill that can lateralize, not just in like having something new or community you belong to, but also inducing a manageable, unpleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
And your knowledge, and people always talk about this exercise, like
For finance
anecdotally.
bros, this is called microdosing discomfort.
This is you can check out Preston's private. Well, he can't have a private practice yet, but
Coming soon.
coming soon to a Zoom near you. But yes,
Probably
okay. So those
Microsoft
are
Teams,
our
but yeah.
components. Is again acceptance or willingness, diffusion, self as context, present moment awareness, values making and meaning making, and committed action.
Mm-hmm.
So those are our components. And so let's come back to our problems, because then I know we're running to the end of the episode right now. So we talked a little bit about diffusion and self as context. What for me, I think willingness for me would sound like reminding myself, or like having reminders and connecting frequently just to remember that like I don't feel like getting up and starting to like do dishes and get ready for bed. I'd rather stay on my phone because I like feels good to be distracted.
But
To make a small,
being willing to do it tired, being willing to do it when you don't want to.
I think being willing for me to trust that if I have enough experience knowing that if I just get up and tolerate it for the first 5 minutes, then I enjoy it and I'm glad to be up and moving around and feel much better, go to sleep better and wake up better. And so the willingness to not to push, again, I think I always arbitrarily use 3 to 10% hard, because I think otherwise you keep avoiding if you're like, just push through it. So saying, all right, get up and clean for 5 minutes. And if you really hate it still at the end of the 5 minutes, I mean, this is why I have that like avoidance diary series on TikTok, is like just truly this idea in action over and over again. But the willingness to trust that this current sensation, the willingness, and then also the trust and self as context that this current sensation, even though it feels like I'm just going to keep feeling like it and I want to do this other thing, is actually going to change quite drastically in 5 minutes of doing the feared or like avoided action.
Yeah, and that's very true for running, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It takes like 6 weeks of running continuously before like your first run doesn't suck.
I feel like the first mile always sucks.
Yeah, and it can. Like, you have to know that, like, okay, this discomfort that I'm feeling for like the first 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10, 11, 12. I don't know how fast you run a mile, but it's
Girl, I'm chilling. Yeah.
it's not but it's not going to last
yogging,
forever.
as me and my friend would say in med school. We're going to yog.
And if you get through that first mile, you're like, oh, this is kind of nice,
Yeah.
you know?
And
And
you're like,
then
this is
all
the
of a
best ever.
sudden, yeah, you start getting like good runs and you start to feel in shape. And then you start to get
Then you
like
sign up for a
positive
marathon.
reinforcement. Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
you say,
exactly.
I must be responsible for this challenge.
It's a natural pipeline, really.
So my values would be, I think for me, as Preston, as you know, I started teaching 6:30 a.m. Pilates classes today, and I do it twice a week. And I enjoy it when I have slept well and wake up to an apartment where I've actually like made coffee the night before and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And I would like to continue to enjoy that. And that's a value for me of showing up well and enjoying that part of my life, as well as just exercising in general. So my committed action, I think, maybe not tonight because it's already, what is it? What time is it? 7:15. Well, I guess tonight it would be something, but more importantly, like Sunday before I teach on Monday morning would be keeping in mind that 5-minute timer idea of when it hits 7 o'clock, I'm not going to feel like getting up from whatever I'm watching or leaving my friend or doing whatever,
Mhm.
but trying to diffuse, notice my values, do the action I said I would, and notice the self as context and be like, I'll feel differently in 5 minutes and feel better overall for the next 24 hours. Because what I think of it as act with this kind of thing is like, this is actually pleasure maxing for me. And like this 5 minutes of like being distracted on my phone because the inertia is not better than the next 24 hours of me being pissed because I stayed up too late, made myself tired, and everything's a mess, and I'm like anxious and overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like those. Those are good commitments. And I think you'll find a way to balance both pleasure and a clean apartment.
Thank you for
I
your
think
belief in me.
my commitment action is, I think it's probably actually going to be to like find more ways to distract myself. I think I can be present and do things in my house without like forcing myself to be bored. But like if I have that feeling of boredom, I'm going to commit to finding a way to extinguish that boredom without checking my phone. So I'm bored, but let me go do my paint by numbers instead or something. And then I think I can also commit to spending more time on the computer to like kind of check the status of my posts.
Mhm.
And namely because I'm acknowledging that as like intentional time that I'm using for it, and it's not something that's secondhand capturing my attention. It's a place where I'm willing to spend my attention.
Yeah.
So those are my two commitments.
And when the urge comes up to not wait till you can check your computer, how might you use self as context or some of these ideas of like diffusing from the intense thought or feeling?
Mm-hmm. I think I'll kind of like say intentionally, like I'm only going to go to this app and I'm only going to check one thing,
Mhm.
and then I'll like set it down
Right. But you're
afterwards.
talking about actions. How do you
Oh,
diffuse? How do you know, like, what is something that if let's flip this. If you were observing like your brain and thoughts coming up, this urge to check and kind of worry of like, what if I get canceled comes up, what would you say to another person who's
it's
experiencing that?
very unlikely, and while the risk is always there, you're going to have to tolerate that risk to live your life in the way you want to.
Yeah. Or so that's kind of a CBT. So I'm sorry, I'm doing the thing where I test you on this. Um, so just noticing like that is a thought I have, which may or may not be true. That is not me.
Okay. Yeah, it's always more simple.
Yeah. Diffusion is less about disproving or kind of fighting the thought or coming up with a
Mm-hmm.
new solution as much as it's just being like, and that's there. That's a leaf on the river.
Mm-hmm.
It
And
just,
that's a thought that I will think,
yeah.
and I thought it.
And you
Okay.
thought it. The last thing I will say that we just didn't mention is we talked about this in the mindfulness episode, but practicing mindfulness is like doing a bicep curl. Some people are taught mindfulness as this thing that's going to make anxiety go away, but mindfulness as it's studied in stress reduction and in ACT is about building the ability to move your attention and to notice where it's at and try and refocus it somewhere else.
Mm,
And so some people will experience mindfulness and have someone say like, "Oh, if you're having a panic attack, just try to like notice your breathing." And they'll say that's actually worse and I just was even more aware of my panic attack. Mindfulness is something you build over time, not something that is built the moment you need it. Um,
mm,
so in ACT with like willingness and present moment awareness, often my ACT sessions with my patients will start with 5 minutes of me leading them through a mindfulness exercise because we are
mm,
just trying to get reps in of being able to move your attention despite boredom, despite it wandering somewhere else, and to gently diffuse and come back. So I do not recommend to my patients who have not done mindfulness to try mindfulness the first time mid panic attack or like flashback with PTSD. That will likely just worsen things.
mhm.
Okay. So
Right.
we covered a lot about ACT today.
Yeah, we did. I feel like I learned a lot.
Good.
I got through all the stages. I mean, I still try
Great.
to do CBT at the end because
That's
that's
okay.
it's a thought that my mind
They're
had,
related.
and I went to it. You know,
Right.
I tend to
You
think
fused with it.
CBT like, yeah,
You love
but
CBT.
that is or isn't me. You know.
um, let us know if you guys like these kind of therapy explainer episodes. We can also do more ACT episodes, or we can. I do think one of the things with learning different forms of therapy, or just even getting to know it and experience it, is some of the like role plays we do, where you get to see it being kind of played out in a session. We talked a little bit about our own stuff now, but kind of more, it's easier to understand when you can experience it happening in like a faux session, as we've done with different fictional characters on prior episodes. So let us know what you like, dislike about any of these so we know what you would like more of.
Yeah. And we could do whole episodes of just like even the same characters, but maybe through like different lenses of therapy or something to see
fun.
how they compare. Yeah.
I still need to watch The Sopranos.
That would be interesting. Well, if you ever want to leave any of these comments, you can always come and chat with us and the Human Content Podcast family. We're on Instagram and TikTok. We have a How to Be Patient Instagram that's growing. We have, I think, like 2,800 or so loyal followers these days. Keep sending us messages. We'll do our best to reply. You can also contact the team directly at howtobepatientpod.com.
Leave reviews because they do help us in the Apple Podcast Store.
And they also help us like learn more about what you think, which is...
And we read them. We screenshot them and send them to each other and say,
yep, we do.
Hey.
It's like our main form of communication is like through you guys reviewing stuff.
Yeah, you're like our like child after divorce.
You can always see more from me and Margaret at our own separate accounts. So Margaret's at Bad Our Everyday.
Our separated accounts.
I'm on YouTube at It's Prezero. Margaret's at Bad Our Everyday on Instagram and TikTok. Shout out to any of our new listeners. I think we have people all over the world. So I saw people listen from Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Germany, the UK. Yeah, so thanks for being here. That's all. Like, I didn't realize that we have like an international presence. So you guys are the best. Thanks again for listening. We're your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Portizo. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn more about our program disclaimer and ethics policies, submission verification, licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production.
How to be patient.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.